teaching you the art of industrial real estate. This is On Air with Team Jensen.
Woo! All right.
We're back.
Welcome to episode 6 of On Air, the art of industrial real estate. And today we have a guest on with us, Matt Baysinger from Swell Spark. Matt, thanks for coming on with us. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure to hang out with you. Thanks, man.
It's a fun time. Well, excited to have you on. You have a lot of cool things you've been up to over the years. And I know we've really, since I started 7 years ago, I think we've been connected, and it's been really fun getting to work with you and kind of learn through you. And but just kind of want to jump into how you got started, because I think you have a really cool background, and I know you're a Kansas City or Lawrence guy, growing up, and but really love, the story of what you're doing here in Kansas City today and what you bring to town. And so I'm kind of curious, Swell Spark, I think a lot of people probably don't even know what it is. And so I'd love for you to kind of talk about that and how it enables you to do all the cool concepts around town.
Yeah, so I'll call it the 2-minute version. But I grew up in Colorado, have been in Kansas City area for about 20 years now, went to the University of Kansas. And so my kind of career trajectory right out of school, worked for KU, worked for the NCAA, ended up working at a secondary school, St. James Academy in Lenexa.
Sure.
And with that, I had summers off. And summers off to me as an idea was like, I'm going to hang out with my wife at the pool, who, she's a school teacher. And man, after like 15 minutes of sitting by the pool, I'm like,
now
what do we do for the rest of summer? Like I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And so I started my first company back in customer facing back in 2014. That was called Mass Street Soda, little storefront retail on Mass in Lawrence. And it kind of took off really quickly. Took us by surprise, honestly. And so at the time, I was dabbling with a couple things. I did some video work, and I had my office in the back, and I had the soda shop in the front. And as soon as kind of figured out that I enjoyed that, really started leaning into that. And so that was 2014 that we opened Mass Street Soda. Traveling with my wife in Tennessee, we saw an escape room in 2015. It was this brand new concept. No one had ever heard of it. It was the top rated thing in Nashville, in the whole city, right? And so we were like, what is this?
Yeah, for sure.
Started researching it, thought that Kansas City needed it, and thought that we could do it really well. And so I picked up my partner, Ryan, who came from a kind of industrial fabrication construction background, and said, hey, man, if you can build these and we can dream them up together, I'll do the marketing, and maybe we can do something here. And we were very fortunate that went really, really well. So Breakout KC opened in 2015. At that point, kind of stepped away from education permanently and went full force into entrepreneurialism.
Yeah.
And so fast forward since then, we ended up opening, 6 different locations of our escape room. One in Columbia, Missouri.
Nice.
One in Lawrence, Kansas. We've since sold both of those. In 2017, we started Blade and Timber, which is our axe throwing bar. And that was when kind of Swell Spark had to begin, because I would walk into, maybe a podcast or walk into a networking thing, and they'd be like, oh, it's the Breakout guy. And then the buddy would punch. He's like, no, this is the Blade and Timber guy, you idiot. And I'm like, okay, what? Who am I, right?
For sure.
And so we created Swell Spark as kind of the operating company to oversee, at the time, both of those. But knowing where we'd come from, it was kind of my third customer-facing thing at that point in time, and realized hey, this is what I want to do. I want to make stuff. I want to create new things. So 2017 really was the start of when it got real in many ways. That was the start of when I realized the importance of real estate and all of this. That was the start of kind of building out this company to support the other companies that we were building out. And Swell Spark is kind of a perpetual startup engine. Yeah. Breakout's been going for 8.5 years. I think a lot of people thought that was going to be a 6-month concept,
Right.
Blade and Timber is 6 years now. And so there is, I think, a lifespan to some of the things that we do, but people want to do stuff. People want to have fun. That is never going to change.
Yeah.
And so if we can be the folks who help identify trends in the industry from all over the world, bring them here locally to Kansas City, perfect them, and then ship them back out to other corners of the country, that's kind of what Swell Spark does.
Yeah.
And so at this point, we have 10 stores. We have kind of 2 major markets. We have the Midwest, which is kind of Kansas City centric. So Kansas City, Wichita. We're kind of building in and around this area. We're looking in Northwest Arkansas, and we've been in Nebraska and in Iowa. Then we have this kind of northwest pocket where we have Oregon, Washington, and Honolulu in Hawaii.
Cool.
And so get to kind of bounce between those two regions, and it's been a super fun ride so far. So I get to be, either the dumbest smart guy or the smartest dumb guy in the room when I'm talking to other folks in the real estate industry and trying to figure out what to do. And then, we met, and because you focus on industrial here, and we're generally not an industrial, right? Like we're trying to go main and main.
Yeah.
We're the heart of the power and light district. But what a lot of folks don't realize is we have this industrial 36,000 square foot, our headquarters in Kansas City in the West Bottoms area. And so we actually prefabricate almost everything that we put in our stores. So we design it, we fabricate it. So we have folks of just myriad skill sets who are at our company headquarters utilizing that 36,000 square feet to produce the things that end up being customer facing at all of our stores.
Yeah. No, and it's a cool shop. That's your space you have over there, and it's very cool. You have a lot of talented people on your team too.
We
that
do.
help put it all together.
We do.
And so I fell in love. When we first connected, I loved the concepts.
You fell in love with me. I think that's what is that what you were getting?
I
at,
think he
right?
was headed there.
No,
Yeah.
I just fell in
Thank
love
you.
with the concepts.
Yeah, I'm married.
In the mindset, But it really, because I think you bring a lot of fun to Kansas City. And it's pretty awesome that you've also figured out a good way to, make a living for yourself and your family doing so. And you're creating opportunities for your employees. And,
I appreciate that.
I think it's a cool concept.
And your building in the West Bottom is a unique building, multi-story.
It is
reusable. I mean, not reusable for a lot of folks,
Sure.
but you've really. I've been through it.
Maximize it.
Yeah.
It's it's 8,000 square foot floor plates. It's the perfect space for us, right? And so we've actually had a lot of conversation recently because we're, and Kurt, we've had this, but like we're growing, and we're growing in our fabrication needs. We have a store opening in Lawrence today, actually, for Blade and Timber. We have a Manhattan. I can't say the Manhattan Project, right? Like that's we have a store in Manhattan opening next month in October, and then we'll have another store opening in Lawrence in like March of next year. And when you prefab 27 mini golf holes, 8,000 square feet starts to feel really small, really quick, per floor plate. And so we've been trying to figure out what does the next version of this look like for us. But I think, for the last 8 years, that building has just been perfect.
Yeah.
It's been perfect. Yeah.
And well located. How you have a direction here, Kurt, but share with us how you managed through COVID with all this public-facing business.
Manage maybe isn't the right word. No, I think there's some really neat
Survived.
stories. Yeah, that have and that really is what it is. What was funny, I guess, in retrospect about the pandemic was I really thrive. Call it going from 0 to 1, right? I like being scrappy. I like kind of that really early startup phase. Like I like the idea of like, hey, what materials do we? Okay, there's some 2x4s. Like let's put something together and have some fun with it. I'm cheap is really another way of saying it, And so in the early days of the pandemic, it was like, man, what can we do, and what can we do quickly, and what are the biggest needs that we have? And I remember having a conversation with my buddy Andy Rieger. And Andy, and we were meeting every single day, a handful of entrepreneurs and startups in Kansas City to kind of talk about, hey, how are we going to navigate this? What are you seeing? What are you doing for your staff? So on and so forth. And I told him pretty early on, I was like, hey man, did you see there's this distillery in Portland, they're doing hand sanitizer. And Andy was like, it's the stupidest idea I've ever heard in my life, And I was like, all right.
It just
like,
might work,
And I think within 4 days they were making hand sanitizer.
Yeah, I remember. I got some of this.
Yeah, and the issue.
When they were like the first in town to be.
They were, and they were able to pivot really quickly and make it on a grand scale, which was incredible because there was such a need. I think people forget what the need was, but the issue that they were running into is their location over in call it the East Bottoms is not easy to get to. Right, if there's a train that's coming through, you might be delayed for hours.
Right.
And they also just didn't have the systems or processes in place in order to distribute that to folks. And so we had all of these empty storefronts, and we have a whole company that's built off of pre-booking appointments, right? And so I was like, hey man, if you get it to me, I'll get it in the hands of the people, right? And so it was I think the first time that they put out, it was like 500 bottles. It took them 4 hours to get through 500 bottles, just the logistics.
People
right?
coming to them and getting it. Or,
And then the other issue is there are people who'd wait in line for 4 hours, and then they get there and
People were
it
lining
wouldn't
up
be
for
there,
this stuff.
right?
Yeah.
And again, like we were all trying to figure stuff out, and so when we then took it over, we did 500 bottles in 30 minutes, right? Because we put it online, we had folks pre-book, sold out, we had systems in place, and so we became. I mean, we were probably the biggest hand sanitizer distributor, maybe in the world for like 3 weeks. But we were able to ship it out to all of our stores, to do these kind of distribution centers at all of our stores. We made a couple dollars per bottle. We didn't gouge anyone or anything like that, but we provided a service. And so fortunately before any of the government, funding or whatever, like that was what allowed us to keep the lights on and pay rent. 'Cause the bummer about my industry is we're not asset based, right? And so if things aren't great, like I have no fallback. We're experience based. We rely on hundreds of people who want to spend $20 at a time. And when we're literally not allowed to do that, we're like, okay, like,
Right.
what are we gonna
The
do?
flip side of the pandemic is that it, put an emphasis on those experiences. And when people
Sure.
were holed up for months,
Yep.
Then people were that much more eager to get out and do things
Yeah,
like
so
that.
I mean, coming out of the pandemic, was again challenging. There were all sorts of new challenges with staffing and how you do things, or when you have to shut back down. We were in some markets that were super restrictive. I think
Right.
even 2021, one of our stores was open 1 month the whole year, because we were still not allowed to be open per that city's standards.
Right.
So we're not a big company. We're not a small company anymore, but we're not a big company. And so with a super limited staff, the team that I had in the pandemic and the way that they managed and navigated having to really act like we're a 30-person headquarters and we were like 5, and figure all this out and communicate and keep up with government regulations. But the short of the long is, we were very fortunate to be well connected to the Kansas City community and to be able to serve a need. And that got us through kind of the most challenging part. And then as places started to open back up, we kept it really lean and we made it. So we've been super grateful for, some of the opportunities and funds and things that have been set up, especially for folks in my industry. Because I would argue we got hit the hardest of any industry, probably the hospitality kind of entertainment. Our whole thing is gathering people for shared experiences, and we weren't allowed to gather. So
It came to a screeching halt.
yeah,
Really
it did.
And luckily, by that time, 2020, you guys had a fairly established brand, and people
Sure.
knew who you were.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, the 6 months leading up to the pandemic were, even to date, the best 6 months we've ever had.
Really?
And so from a trailing 12, like we have exceeded those numbers, but on a per store basis, like we've not touched that since then. And so I still don't think we're all the way back, to be honest. Even there's some data showing that's like 20% of folks still are not willing to go out and eat at a restaurant.
Yeah.
And so numbers are still down, but the folks who have decided to kind of re-engage, I think, have done so with fervor and intent.
Was the Blade and Timber concept something you saw elsewhere that you brought to Kansas City? Or is
Yeah,
that
so
something you
all
guys
of it.
kinda
Yeah, no.
formulated?
I mean, a lot of people think I'm creative. I'm not. My role is to see concepts and take them and try to make them better. And so we saw, escape rooms were initially from Southeast Asia, but we saw the U.S. really take them and make them into what they are now. So we first saw that in Nashville. Axe throwing bar, first one we saw was in Toronto. A bunch of Canadian lumberjacks drinking beer and throwing axes, and like, man, that's really awesome.
could
Like,
do
if we could just
well.
make it safe, it would probably be pretty great. And then even mini golf started to see a renaissance in the UK in 2017, 2018. And so we were initially set to open in April of 20 for that concept. And then we had a pop-up thing that it's probably our most like ferocious fan base, which is called Choir Bar. And we would have 300 to 400 folks show up to do these like participatory concerts. And we've not done that since the pandemic. I think we will bring it back here shortly. But we saw that in Adelaide, Australia, so
like
it's-
like choral music.
Yeah.
kind of.
Okay.
We're usually taking very popular songs, but it is scratching the itch. Like, you think of how many how many folks did choir
Oh,
in high
yeah.
school or college, and then they
here.
just stopped, right?
Choir president in high school.
Yeah, see, and like, there's not a lot of not a lot of opportunities, and so we want to, obviously with Choir Bar, we wanted to engage those folks, but we also wanted to engage people who just like enjoy karaoke, you know, or just
Right.
want to be with friends, and so you don't have to read music, you don't have to know, you
Good.
know, any note, like you show up and
covers of popular
we
songs.
basically
Right.
teach you a song in a 3-part harmony, and so
Right,
you self-select, hey, I'm a high, mid, or a low.
Right.
And then if you're low, like
Keep it
we teach you the
simple.
bass part, and you do, you know. And if you're high, then and then there's always like the 10 people in the room who just like naturally know how to harmonize above and beyond. We're just like, hey, do your thing, you know, like have fun with that. And so, but all of the things that we've done, and even what we're looking at future facing, you know, it's hey, maybe there's someone in Columbus, Ohio, who is doing something amazing. It's like that plus this, and it becomes something amazing, hopefully.
Yeah.
Is there like a bar at the pop-up music deal?
Oh
too?
yeah.
Huh?
I mean the whole thing.
High
is
school
gathering-
choir with a bar.
Yeah, that's. I feel like I can't say it like that, having worked in a high school, because it feels there's some dissonance there.
I can. You can.
People who were formerly high school students at least 3 years ago in a bar. How about that?
there you
know? He's wearing a Mizzou shirt, so I think there might be some underage things that they would never let fly at KU.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, the hawk only lets in.
Well, so I would assume a part of your business responsibilities are that you spend some time throughout the year exploring and
absolutely.
looking for new venues and opportunities.
it's one of my favorite things
Sure.
to do, you know. I mean, and it's to the point now, like I have friends who literally today, this guy's like, dude, you got to see what I just saw in the UK. You know, he's like, you need to go. And I'm like, all right,
Let's go check
pull
it
my
out.
arm, you know. But I think that, and what's been really interesting and kind of bringing it back to, you know, our friendship is a lot of the concepts that I think would have measures of success, I don't think would have long-term measures of success. I think there's a lot of things that people want to do once, right? And there's been concepts we've seen, like rage rooms, for instance.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, Matt, are you going to do a rage room? I'm like, you know, we might do a rage night or something like that.
What is a rage room?
You show up and you break stuff.
Yeah.
You get
Oh,
a baseball bat, and we,
Like
you know,
there's
you
an old
get
car,
a beat up
TVs.
car,
or
You don't want to host it at your house.
TVs
though.
or computers or whatever, right? And like, I don't want to sign a 5-year lease on a rage room. I just don't. I think once you do it once, you're like, that was awesome. Probably not going to do that again, you know?
Right.
But I think there are so many concepts that if I had the right real estate where I could do, you know, a great food and beverage program and just have this revolve. And so we just
rotating,
bought, you know, this Lawrence store that we're opening today, you know, on August 31st in an hour and a half. Is the first time we've done it on the dirt that we own. And so I think as far as a future-facing model, real estate ownership is a huge part of what we think that we'll be able to do.
Where in Lawrence?
722 Massachusetts. Yeah, so
Mass.
heart of downtown. You're right there on
Cool.
on Mass Street. Yeah. And so this particular, you know, this will be both Blade and Timber is what opens today, and then Sinker's Lounge will open in the same space in about 6 months. So we'll have both the mini golf and the Blade concept in a single building, and that we control, right?
Sure.
We control top to bottom, and so I think to be able to do something like that in Kansas City is going to be a next big step for us that we'd like to find a way to do that. But it's been so fun as we've opened locations. You see what does well and what doesn't, and like it all comes back to where you put it in a lot of ways, right? Like you can have a great concept, but if it's not in the right neighborhood, it's just not going to work. And so I've
Even
loved,
though some of these things are destination locations,
Yep.
I mean, I know I'm going, I find you.
Sure.
But you're still a lot of just the foot traffic and people seeing and kind of knowing you're there.
yeah, I mean, if only 20% of our guests are walk-in, that still means 20% of our guests are walk-ins, you know? And you don't often see movie theaters all by themselves in the middle of nowhere, right? They're always around something else because it's dinner and a movie.
Right.
And so I think for us, like, especially now with Amazon and all the online sales stuff, like to give people a reason to go to something is so important. But it's so important to couple that with something. You know, all the data says like when you go out and do something, you're often if you're already going to Blade and Timber, you're like, oh, we're already at Town Center. We might as well stop by, I don't know, Claire's, get some earrings, you know, or whatever. And so, or vice versa, like, hey, do we want to go to this shopping mall or this one? Hey, this one has Blade and Timber. Let's go to that one. So I think they do. I don't know that anyone has done a super eloquent job of very clearly articulating the importance of that relationship, but I think we can all agree that it is.
Oh, sure.
Right.
Sure. Now the retail world certainly knows it because
Sure,
they, you
yeah.
know, there's a whole system to the anchor
Absolutely,
tenant versus
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been fun to get to dabble and learn about real estate and kind of figure out how it should play a role for us. And you know, you can be at Main and Main for $50 a foot, but you can be 1 block away for $25 a foot, and 2 blocks away for $12. You know, it's like, and trying to weigh that balance of, all right, where do we go, and what's the purpose of this, and how does being 1 block away affect? Because in some markets, it's like you're 1 block away, you might as well go to another city, you know. And some markets, like 1 block away is totally fine.
Right.
You know.
Well, in the future, that could be a future asset that you mentioned that you were kind of lacking. That
Absolutely,
you know.
and that's the plan. That's the goal, right? Is like to have that. It's been so funny, man. I'm 37 now. I'll be 38 in a couple of weeks, and like, I started this company when I was 28 or 29, and like, not a care in the world. Like, just risk all of it every time. And now I have 3 kids, and it's like, you know, I would like for them to have a house growing up for the rest, you know, and
for sure.
it's funny growing up for sure.
Yeah.
So.
And you probably, I mean, and you blink, and the 10 years has gone by.
It's unbelievable, you know. There's like the mile markers, right? So start of school is one where it's just like, oh my, like my daughter's in 4th grade. Like what? I remember being a college guidance counselor, and I was meeting with these parents and with these seniors in high school or below, and the parents just like deer in a headlight as I'm talking through, like, hey, your kid is leaving in 3 months, you know, and they're just like. And in my head, having not had kids yet, I was like, you had 18 years to prepare for it. Like, how are you surprised right now? And now that I have kids, I'm like, oh my gosh, like it goes so fast, you know? Even reflecting that we've been, as a company, we're coming up on, you know, we'll be year 9, which is almost year 10. It's like that. I mean, what's the stat? Like most companies don't make it, 2 or 3 years or whatever. And it's like, okay, like we're here, you know, like what do we
holds a
do
little
now?
more weight when you say
it does, yeah.
That's cool.
No, I love it. That's awesome. And I mean, Kansas City, you have a lot of plans and things you've done. Is there anything you have coming up that you're excited about that you can talk about, or do you have any? Like the downtown ballpark and stuff. Are you going to try and piggyback off of some of that concept and whatnot?
You know, Kansas City is really interesting, and again, we're in some bigger markets, right? We're in Seattle, for instance, and Seattle isn't changing much at this point. Like it's grown.
Right. It is what it is, like for now.
But to see even like the type of rent rates that we were getting 8 years ago compared to what our renewals they want those to be at, to what they're projecting, and it's fascinating, and if folks here locally are not paying attention, they should, because this city is changing. I think in a really good way. You know, there's arguments for the opposite, of course. That things are going to get more expensive, more than likely, but I think our city is just going to get a lot better. You know, we took the whole team out to the Royals game and sat in a suite last night, and we had a ton of fun. And you know, 25 minutes into my drive home, I was like, this is where I could be starting my drive from. If I were, you know, like, man, how nice would that be?
Yeah.
Or just as a Royals fan, we've been to some games together. Like, one of the sites initially that they looked at was in the West Bottoms, and I was like, if they put it in the West Bottoms, I'm going to every game, right? Like, I'm gonna go just hang out. I'll work from, you know, whatever. Growing up in Denver and seeing what Coors Field did to downtown Denver gets me so excited for what a new stadium could do for Kansas City.
Yeah.
But it's going to change a lot, man. You know, but the next 10 years in KC are going to be, I think, incredible. We're going to look back 10 years from now after, you know, what the World Cup forced us to do to some of our stuff, and we're just like, oh my gosh. I remember when I moved here in 2001, and there's that radio tower on like 39th Street, right?
Yeah.
And my mom was just like, hey, see that tower? I was like, yeah. She's like, don't go north of it.
That's where we are today.
Right. I know. But in 2001, there was no point for a high school kid to go to downtown, right? There was, and there's no point to go east of that tower.
Yeah.
And now, like half the time I'm around town, I'm going north or east, right?
Right.
And like, because that's where it's at.
There's a lot, we have a lot more to offer.
We do.
For sure.
We
and
do.
I think and it's growing.
Yeah.
And back to your point though, like it's with the Royals and Kaufman or the stadium moving, it's kind of like you talking about being where you want to be located for your concepts. You know, I'm gonna go downtown to a game 10 times as much versus drive out to the complex, which I still love Kaufman Stadium.
It's a great stadium.
Where you can go and you can do things, and I can pop down from the office, 10 minutes away. It's just
Jump on the trolley.
It's going to make it so much easier to put fans in seats.
It'll make it a lot easier for the casual fan to decide to catch a game because it's right down there.
I'm much more than a casual fan.
But you know what will put even more butts in the seat? Putting a winning product on the field.
That helps.
That does trump
I
all.
can't help with that. You know, I every time that argument comes up, though, I'm just like, you know what? Like, how fun was 14 and 15? Like, would I rather have a above average kind of playoff team all the time, or like a World Series caliber team once every 15? Like, I'd go World Series team. You know?
It's nice to hang our hat on it, and it helps that we're being spoiled when it comes to football. Too.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and as a KU guy, I've been extra spoiled over the course of the last 15 years. You know, I have.
I'm all too familiar with that.
We've won some SEC East championships.
There it is. Yeah. No, the secret, you may not know this. I am the black sheep in my family for being a KU person.
Oh,
so
good.
my dad's side of the family, they're from Fulton, Missouri. You know, a lot of Columbia folks, a lot of Mizzou folks.
Sure.
But growing up in Colorado, I didn't know the rivalry. I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
My first semester at KU, I went to my aunt's house, and she is, Missouri alumni board of directors. Like, she had a position that mattered right at the time. She calls me up and she's like, "Hey Matt, I just want you to know, if you want Thanksgiving dinner, you need to wear black and gold." And I was like, at the time, I still was not a KU fan. I was attending there because I got to run track there, but I wasn't like locked in, right? So I get to this Thanksgiving thing and I'm not wearing black and gold because I didn't take her seriously, right? And she's like, she wouldn't let me in her house. She went and she got a black T-shirt. She's like, "If you want to eat, you can wear this." So I was like, all right. So Easter, we're at her house again, and by this time I had lettered, and I was now drinking the KU Kool-Aid and all that stuff, And she calls me again, and she's like, "Hey, as a reminder, you're not eating unless you wear black and gold." And I'm like, "I got you, no problem." So I showed up like with my letter jacket over a KU hoodie, over a KU jacket, over a KU long sleeve, and I show up, she's like, "Where's your black and gold?" I was like, "Don't worry." And I just start taking it off and kind of placing it all over the front of her house. And then I had a black T-shirt on, and she goes, "Touche." Won't make you do that again, Matt. So we've come to embrace the love there. So.
What was your event in track?
800.
Cool.
800, yeah, half mile.
Ooh,
So.
that's a tough one.
It was, but it was fun. It's been interesting just in entrepreneurship. A lot of the folks I worked with initially were people who I met through athletics. And I think just the drive that we were forced to have to compete at Division I level, they make all the commercials in the NCAA and like they're super cheesy, but it translated, that entrepreneurial startup mode. It was fascinating to see how many folks came from an athletics background. But super grateful for it, but I think more than anything, what I've found is the community that I built, going to a state school, being at KU, the way that that's translated into the contacts that I've had, even now, 15 years out of college, still folks are just like, "Oh yeah, you're a KU guy, this or that." It's crazy how important your community is, especially in a really big small town or small big town like Kansas City. I mean, it's everything, right? It's everything.
Yeah, no doubt.
Oh, yeah, and we're pretty spoiled in Kansas City with it, But, well, jumping around, I mean, obviously the future is bright in Kansas City.
Yep.
Are there other markets that you have your eye on or love working in? I think it's awesome. You're focusing on a lot of college towns too. Like your concepts are a great alternative to a lot of the things kids are doing in college.
Yeah, Manhattan will be really interesting for us. We will be the largest entertainment provider in the city of Manhattan. They don't have a Top Golf. They don't have iFly. They don't have these things. And so we're like the only place in the whole city, and probably I think they would still say Manhattan is Eastern Kansas. I kind of call it Central Kansas, but that whole west of Topeka, we're probably the biggest entertainment space anywhere.
Yeah.
So really excited to see what that does. I know the city of Manhattan has been really excited to have us. It's going to be fun, and Manhattan's a fantastic town. I'm not supposed to like Columbia or Manhattan, right? But having worked for the Big 12s, I feel like I have to appreciate both of them formerly. But what? Like, I'm the owner of my company. I don't have investors. So there are other groups, particularly in the mini golf space, that have the same investment money that Topgolf got. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so part of our goal is to go where they aren't,
Right.
and where I don't think they're going to be. I really, if I had to bet money, I think we'll be open in Northwest Arkansas in the next year. I think that market is just incredible. I think all of the good things that are happening in Kansas City are also happening there. The growth there has just been, it's unreal to see what's happening in Fayetteville and Bentonville and Rogers.
Yeah.
But I think for us, kind of these, like Kansas City for mini golf is probably the biggest, or one of the biggest markets that we'll get into. I don't see us going to Seattle even.
Yeah.
But the thing about my industry is, like, speed is the name of the game, right? Especially if we're trying to be first to market, or if we're trying to beat out some of the bigger, more well-capitalized groups, we have to be first. And so part of our whole growth emphasis is going to be, where can we go and where can we be first?
Right. Do you guys ever have people that reach out to you from random cities saying,
All the
hey,
time.
Come open a store here?
All the time. That's what's been cool about having some success, is like in the early days, we were working with concepts people didn't know, right? And so we would, if I were to have gone to Cordish to open an escape room in 2014, they would have probably laughed me out of the room.
Yeah.
Right.
But now it's to the point that I have shopping centers and power centers all over the country who are saying, hey man, like, how much TI do you need? Like, we want you.
Right. We want your
Please
use.
come,
Yeah.
because they know that destination entertainment helps restaurants, and it helps jewelry shop. It helps everything
Helps
thrive.
them attract those people.
100%,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So, I remember it's probably 3 or 4 years ago, but it was a Kansas City kind of real estate newsletter, and it was talking about the anchor tenants of different shopping centers. And when it was talking about Town Center, it put us and Macy's, and Macy's, the movie theater, and Dick's Sporting Goods as the 4 anchors of Town Center. And we were like, what?
That's pretty sweet. Yeah.
But they were looking at who drives traffic, like who brings people to the space. And unquestionably, we were driving traffic to the space.
Yeah.
So that's, the benefit of what we do is we kind of get to be in the room, and we get to go into some really cool places where, the rent generally for us might be a little bit cheaper, and the TI might be a little bit more, because they understand that we're going to help, if they have a % rent deal, or a ceiling, on the restaurant nearby or whatever, they know that we're going to help their sales go up.
Yeah. Sure.
So they're usually happy to, make it easy for us to do that.
Yeah. Deal friendly.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and Kansas City, as far as, your guys' concepts moving forward, do you foresee that you'll continue to operate, like, it sounds like Swell Spark is your goal is to have Swell Spark be able to continue to just create the new concepts that are going to be popular. And
Yep.
And I think as you own real estate, it's going to make it that much easier to let yourself have a startup, because you won't have to necessarily sign a long-term lease with
Yep.
a tenant. You'll have to take the risk of spending the money on.
What's been interesting over the last, call it, year, is we've started to have other entertainment users pitch us on operating their concepts.
Okay.
Because they've seen that we've done well.
Right.
And as my kind of mentality or mind shift has changed, I think we'll probably start to get into a lot more of our owned real estate development, right? I think that's a huge thing of creating an asset class for our company that's going to allow us to grow in a really healthy capacity. But I think there's also this other tremendous opportunity where there's tons of other entertainment concepts who, maybe mom and pop tried it and they realized, like, hey, this is actually really hard.
Right.
We need operators to help us do this well.
Right.
And so we're, talking with 2 different groups in Kansas City right now of folks who have said, we think we built something pretty good, but we think that you can run it better than we can. And so what would that relationship look like? It's funny looking back because I didn't start this business with the intention of growing it. I started because I thought it'd be fun to do an escape room.
Right.
Like that's it, honestly.
Right.
And have continued to find joy in growing personally and professionally and individually, but also continuing to find just how many opportunities there are to do cool things and to make money and to make a living and to, build your network and to make friends. Like there's just, you don't know it till you know it, know? And so it's a neat stage to just realize like, man, the sky is kind of the limit here. Like there's just so many ways to grow. And as the world continues to change as well, like if we can be some of the quickest ones to change with it, I think we'll continue to hopefully have some success in the space.
Yeah. Well, I think there's, even though our, Kessinger Hunter is so much different than Swell Spark from an industry perspective, but you guys are still in the same place of, you want to utilize your relationships in your community to kind of let the future dictate and tell you where you're going and what projects are worthwhile to work on and what kind of goals you want to chase. And so I just think it's cool. It's a very network and community driven operation.
It is. And kind of to your point, and as you mentioned earlier, like part of my role is just to figure out what people want. Yeah. And then figure out where to put it. There's a lot of folks who have a dream or an idea or a vision of doing something. We just actually do it. And no disservice to them, but I'm part of this group called Acumen, which is a CEO peer group, and it's been a ton of fun to get to know these folks. And of my group of probably 10, 12 guys or folks, I'm one of 2 that are like entrepreneurial, and the other are like true CEO type, right? And so we took over this space in Lawrence on August 1st, and we're opening on the 31st, right? Yeah. And my group, they were just like, you're doing what? Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is the easy part. Like this is so natural. Like this is so fun. Whereas I'm coming to them, I'm like, hey, like help me with this P&L, and I'm trying to do this. They're just like, hey man, this is the easy part. And I'm like, shut up. Like you shut your mouth. Right. So it's, I think just realizing, like I used to really shy away from the word entrepreneur. But I think realizing just I'm pretty natural. That's who I am. Right. And to go ahead and own that and love it and be okay with it, even though it's maybe a flashy word or what it gets misused in some ways, but it's like, no, man, like I'm pretty good at starting businesses. Yeah. And so if that's my role and goal, like the big question I have to solve for is what's the best way to do that? And could that mean taking on, funding at some point? Absolutely. Could that mean going into partnership with developers? 100%, right? And those are all conversations that I try to have with regularity to help myself learn and grow and develop of what those opportunities are in the first place. Right. But again, when you look out in Kansas City and you see cranes and you just hear all this talk of development, it's like, man, there's going to be a lot of cool stuff coming. Yeah, no doubt. And hopefully I can be a part of some of it.
Did you guys experience some barriers of entry in those early days of the escape room when you're trying to sign a lease?
Oh my gosh,
the landlord's like, this use is never going to work.
In the early days, it's like, hey, I'll just leverage everything. Like, you need to sign up my house and, and so
personal guarantee.
Yeah, and so folks become a little less scared when you're willing to do that. I think now, I remember when we first went to Honolulu, and I think we got turned down by 42 landlords who they're just like, this ain't going to work here. Like Hawaii's different. Right. What works in the mainland isn't going to work here. And we finally found a shopping center that was set to be demolished 10 months later. And they're like, you want to pay rent here? We're like, yeah. They're like, if you just pay taxes, you can have the space. We're like, okay, great. We'll pay triple nets and call it a day. One, it didn't get demolished for 3 years. So we had 3 years of just triple nets, which was fantastic. Clutch. And then 2, again, by the time that shopping center was demolished, we had every shopping center and hotel in all of Honolulu begging us to come and open in their space instead because they saw the traffic that we were driving. Mm-hmm. And so that has been, in the early days, it was like, hey, I'm signing a lease and I'm paying for everything. And then it was like, I'm signing a lease and I'm getting TI. And then it was like, and at first everything's personally guaranteed.
Right.
And then it was like, oh, we can do a corporate guarantee. And then it's like, oh, we don't need a guarantee. Like they just trust, or they see that we're going to be
Like a
successful.
credit.
And
Yeah.
so that growth trajectory has been fun as well, to just learn what's possible in the space.
Well, and what would be your, not that you're asking for a bunch of competition, but younger entrepreneurs out there that are wanting to chase, a dream similar to that, or just want to go and build something fun. I mean, what would your kind of advice be if you were talking to yourself 10 years ago?
I don't know that it'd be any different, right?
Yeah.
Like I think for the younger, because I with my background in education, both teaching in high school and college, it's like I'm naturally, I go and I talk to folks at KU or at Wichita State and a lot of high schools around the area pretty often. And a lot of people are like, well, how do you raise money? I was like, you don't need to, right? Just start building something, like build your minimum viable product, make sure people actually like it. Looking at customer segregation, like for all of our stuff, our early adopter type folks, like they don't care if it's polished. They just want to do something new and fun.
Right.
Yeah.
The later folks care if it's polished, right? But that's not your first group of customers anyway.
Right.
So my advice almost every time for the younger generations is like, just start,
Do it.
And if you have one of those things where you do need to get VC funding and do some sort of AC, like I'm just not the guy to give you advice because I don't even know how to do that either. So if you need the Silicon Valley route, like go talk to someone who did that, because, and then tell me what you find out, because I maybe someday I can learn that too. But all of our things, it's like we just, you have time or money. And if you don't have a lot of time, then you need a lot of money. If you don't have a lot of money, then you're going to have to put a lot of time. And so trying to figure out what you have and how you can leverage that and just freaking do it, you know? But again, a lot of that comes down to oftentimes you have to have a space to do it. And so trying to figure
that's
out,
what's tricky.
how to.
Did you have to tiptoe around any trademarks or anything like, you can't do this concept because, we've got the rights to it?
Sure.
Like that?
There was a concept that we really wanted to do, that the folks who began with this concept in like Sweden, they did a fantastic job of trademarking a lot of the things that I don't think honestly should have been able to be trademarked.
Right.
And like a lot of the patents and whatnot that they had. And unfortunately, they haven't run their business very well either. And so just no one gets to do that. Even though it is so fun, like it is such a cool thing, but no one is willing to try to mimic it because they're fearful that it will go to court and litigation, and regardless of outcome, it takes time and money to do that. So that was one that we've considered and still might, which is why I'm not being very specific about it.
Just figured.
Yeah. I think what's been interesting lately is we've started to get into like more, Class A type shopping centers is just the use clauses of we'll go in and, they'll be like, oh, you know what, this, Dave & Buster's type place.
Right.
They have an exclusivity of mini golf. We're like, they don't even have mini golf. Like, you're correct, but they have the exclusivity here. So you can't come.
Gotcha.
I'm like, cool. Like, can we talk to Dave or Buster? Can we convince him? And we'll give him $1. And again, it's learning how to do business. Which is at times incredibly frustrating and also at times super fun. So
Did you ever consider like a franchisee route? Or
we are right now.
Oh,
yeah,
you
we
are?
are right
Okay.
now. I think Sinkers more than anything is very franchisable, and in full disclosure, I think we have found a lot of success in Kansas City with that concept, but we're also in very prime real estate. And so one of the big questions with Manhattan and with Lawrence is, can this do well in smaller towns? And if it can, I think that's the route we'll go. I think it would be a really good opportunity for us to pursue that. We've been meeting with folks around Kansas City who have franchised really well.
Right.
And so we're kind of preparing for that to be an option.
Gotcha.
Whether or not that comes to fruition, I have no idea.
Just with
right?
the multiple locations, it seems like a natural fit potentially.
Right. Because again, what we get back to, we're trying to grow kind of this foundational element of our company, but without being an asset-based company, we can't take on a ton of debt.
Right.
When we can't take on a ton of debt, we can only grow through cash flow, which limits our growth.
Sure.
One to 3 stores a year, right? Which is a bummer because you have these VC-backed groups that can do 20.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, do you want to take on
Right.
partners? Do you want to take
Yeah.
on funding? Do you want to give up equity? Do you want to?
It's a big decision to make.
Lots of big decisions, you know. So things that hopefully I'll figure out over the course of the next decade.
Well, I'm sure you will as you get into and now that you're getting into this kind of the peak of your career, really. So, but I really appreciate you coming on with us
Yeah, man.
today.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
It's been a
cool
lot of
story.
fun and love watching you guys grow around town and excited to see
appreciate
what
it.
you bring to Kansas City moving forward. So-
Yeah. Well, thank you.
And the
Thank
last
you.
thing I wanted to just ask, I mean, Swell Spark, if someone wants to work at, at one of your spaces or
Yep.
even come to work at Swell Spark, what's kind of the best way to reach out or go?
Yeah, swellspark.com, the website, not Swell Spark, not, no, but Swell Spark. And we have contact forums career. I'm Matt at swellspark.com. If anyone ever wants to reach out, try to be a friend to those who need it and a contact. But yeah, we're continuing to grow and change and do cool stuff. And so we love to work with great people and work alongside great people as well. So if you're in the Kansas City area or if you want to be or whatever,
There you go.
I'm easy to find.
Yeah.